Namaste, Salam Alaikum, hello, hola, bonjour. Well, there are many ways conveying the same emotions. It's just the culture we all belong to or we come from. And this is exactly what I'm going to talk about today. I come from the country which endorses Vasudhaiv Kutumbakum, a Sanskrit phrase which means the world is one family. World is becoming indeed a global village. Very good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Kavita Bajpai, coming from India. Have spent almost 25 years in education so far, and would like to continue with the same passion in the same field till my last breath. And yes, when it comes about my journey, a quick brief about it. So I'm a passionate educator. I say it with a lot of enforcement on it. The reason being, I am an educator by choice and have been into education, followed by education leadership for a good 16, 17 years, and then decided to come up with my own venture and co-founded a school, which is in the southern part of the country. That is the International School of Trishur. Now, this school basically endorses the child-centric pedagogy, and we also have the global community studying in our school, teaching in our school. Apart from that, since I'm being based out in Mumbai, startup mentoring in education and skill development space is something which I am doing for past 2 years. So very much into education, or you may say breathing education. So today, what I'm going to talk about, it is nothing new. It is something what we have been experiencing in many ways. Perhaps it could be just a reinforcement. Perhaps it could be just something which I'm trying to remind you all. Or maybe something which is so open-ended in nature that we need to discuss. So the topic for today's discussion, which I'm going to present before you, is nurturing cultural awareness in students, teachers to enhance overseas teaching experiences. And what I feel, what and how we can do it, it is possible only and only by creating culturally responsive teaching and creating the cohesive environment. What is culturally responsive environment? As it is written here, we can very much relate to it. This is an approach that empowers individuals intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural references to impart knowledge, skills, attitude, and above all, values. Yes, values. Because when we talk about the future of education, when we talk about how the education is going to shape up after especially this pandemic era where we were never ready for the unseen, but now we feel the need of being ready for the unseen, then certainly creating such responsive environment is really important. And what I personally feel, it's all about the competency building where the values and ethics are going to play a major role. And inclusion is something which I feel that is going to be the key for globalization. Culture is centered to teaching and learning. It plays a role not only in communication and information, but also in shaping the thinking process. A pedagogy that acknowledges, responds to, and celebrates fundamental cultures offers full equitable access to education for students from all the cultures. And it endorses inclusion in a big way. So when I say inclusion, we mean not only the inclusion coming from learning difficulties, learning disabilities, but also the diversities from which the students and the teachers, or for that matter, the entire fraternity, come from. So what are the characteristics of culturally responsive environment? So positive perspectives of all stakeholders. It's very important. One has to be open and collaborative in nature. Educator has to work as a facilitator, reshaping the curriculum, which has to be global in nature. Of course, every curriculum has its own needs based upon their demographic and geographic needs. But at the end of the day, if we need to address the issue of cultural diversity, it has to be reshaped, keeping the globalization in mind. It has to be student-centric. The instructions or the knowledge what we are going to construct, it has to be student-centric. Then culturally mediated instructions, we need to foster a sense of belongingness, sharing cultures, and of course, as I always say, inclusion. So the last two pointers I feel very, very important when you talk about sharing cultures, creating the platforms where the cultural diversity can be celebrated, can be shared, people get to know each other better, and that is how it leads to the true meaning of inclusion. Now, what is culture? We have been talking a lot about culture. I mean, since my first few slides, I'm talking about culture. So, what exactly is the culture? So, a shared system of meaning, beliefs, values, behaviors, ideas, skills, art, and tools that are different in each of the world's many human societies through which experience is interpreted and came out. The way our community, our societies are conditioning us creates the culture we live in. As we say, we live in a culturally diverse world. So today's gathering is the best example of the cultural diversity. If I talk about the number of countries, name your countries, I'm sure sitting in this close enclosure as well as while going live to other audience, we can get to know n number of nationalities sitting and coming together for a mission. I think this is one of the finest examples we can all relate to. It's all very well to say that we should be tolerant and accepting, broaden our mental horizons, and be more inclusive. But how do you do it? We all feel threatened when we encounter people who do not fit our idea of normal. The insecurity leads to discomfort, fear, and suspicion. In extreme cases, it leads to hate, crimes, and genocides, as we have seen in the past and present. It's difficult to embrace the cultural diversity, but open-mindedness and inclusion works the best here. Any solution cannot be symptomatic. It must address the core issues, that is our lack of awareness, which has led to the insecurity in the first place. Strife begins because people feel uncomfortable with the unfamiliar and cannot accept the differences. So the effort should always been in the direction of creating the familiarities, creating the opportunities to collaborations and association, and that, believe you me, do wonders. And I'm sure each one of you would agree to that. We work in a culturally diverse community. Now, simple practice is to follow to adopt a diverse society. There are very few, and I'm sure most of us are doing. But again, when I'm addressing you all, I'm sure I'm not only addressing this gathering, but I'm addressing each and every person related to you. So this is going to create a ripple effect, because here, when we are sitting here, we come from the mindset where we talk about globalization, where we talk about cultural diversity, we talk about exchange of culture, respecting each other's cultures. But all this has to move out. All this has to translate into day-to-day life. And then, how we can do it? So there are a few pointers I would certainly like to share it with you. So avoid generalizing people according to groups. Just as our life cannot be summarized based on our gender, nationality, or say line of employment, we should not subject people to our stereotypical notions and personal prejudices. Take care of your language and manners. Every culture has its own tradition and ways. Never mock people or make their stories a parody for a couple of laughs. Get to know the cultural background of the people in our cities and develop sensibilities that respect their practices and habits. When we start to become familiar with it, we will find it endearing rather than unnerving. Developing a healthy curiosity to learn about the differences in other people's traditions that we don't understand. Strength comes from knowing the people we live with. When we learn about their culture, we start to see beyond color of skin, psychology, our own perception and accents. Give up the notion of normal and abnormal. Let's be least judgmental and be with ourselves and with others. Promote multiculturalism on boards of organizations and union of schools to ensure that everyone's voice is heard. This is what we talk about, the culturally diverse community. And as I said in the beginning also, I'm sure many of us are practicing. But again, the need is to make it global truly in nature. that these practices should reach out to each and everyone beyond. Ways to work in a culturally sensitive environment. So be culturally literate, bridge the cultural gap with good communication skills, practice good manners, celebrate traditional holidays, festivals, food, observe and listens to the host country's colleagues, and pay attention to difference in culture. Now, what is culturally responsive teaching and learning? So far, what I have discussed about the culture, I have discussed about how to, which again I'm saying, most of us are doing, but it is just a reinforcement, how to respect, understand, and appreciate each other's culture, how to coexist with each other. Now, what is culturally responsive teaching and learning, and how to create it? So it's a space where teachers are and pupils learn to be empathetic and caring, reflective about their beliefs, about people from other cultures, reflective about their own cultural frames of references, and knowledgeable about other cultures. How to be a culturally sensitive educators? So understanding cultural differences is very important. That comes with eating habits, religion, family and gender, communication, body language, dress code. Now, host communities' culture. Knowledge of history, culture, customs, and traditions is very important. Whichever country a student is moving to or a teacher is moving to work, knowing about the host country is very, very important. Ultimately, this is the place where you are going to spend your quality time, where this is the place where you are going to spend your professional time, or maybe for the students where they are going to learn the most out of. Then the background of the conflict and expectations from the guest. Knowing each other is very, very important. Cultural shock is something which generally we experience, and then there are few stages to it of the cultural shock, which I'm going to talk about in one of my upcoming slides. But over here, why the cultural shock happens, and later we will discuss what is the way to overcome it. So, the unfamiliarity with the language, climate, currency, food, clothing, road signs, values, etiquette, and behavior. Earlier, these could have been really a challenge for any one of us moving from one country to another. But I don't think so with the kind of the exposure which is given to us all over, thanks to the digital revolution, this is any more a challenge. But yes, research is something which is the key. Research is something reading, knowing, experiencing, and then moving forward. Because cultural shock is something which is bound to happen, but how you overcome it, how smoothly you sail through it is very important. So there are 4 stages of cultural shock, which I am going to elaborate upon. The first one is the exploration. This is typically the most, I must say, this is a most exciting stage, because one reaches to a different country, start exploring how this country is. First of all, we actually behave more as a tourist. We try to explore best of the places around, the excursion, meeting people, best of the eating joints, and gradually we start getting into the realities. So this stage typically extends from arrival through the first couple of months within the new country. It is described as being filled with excitement and curiosity. People go out of their way to get acclimated to the culture, often taking language lessons and trying to adhere to cultural norms. A beautiful stage, because when we go all over with all our flexibility, then comes the initial confrontation. Someone who is moving to a different country, trying to be very flexible, trying to explore, but this comes as a primary set of emotional reactions to the loss of perceptual reinforcements from one's own culture to a new cultural stimuli, which have little or no meaning. Cultural shock is uncertainty that leads to anxiety, depression, and isolation in the event people are faced with an unfamiliar culture. So you can understand how the mindset or how the emotions are changing. The excitement is changing into the anxiety. And this is not new, this is not unusual, rather it happens. And from here begins the adjustment crisis. And that is the point where the host country as well as the guest moving to that country, they have to work in collaboration. Frustrations are often subdued as travelers begin to feel more familiar and comfortable with the culture, people, food, and languages of new environment. Navigation becomes easier and friends and communities of support are established. Details of local languages may become more recognizable during the adjustment stage, and this can only be possible with a two-way collaboration. And then comes the most beautiful stage, which ensures that you are going to stay here long, or you are going to have whatever period or tenure you're going to spend in this country is going to be fruitful, it's going to be smooth, and it's going to be beautiful. And that is the recovery or acceptance. So generally, through sometimes weeks, months, or years after wrestling with the emotional stages outlined above, the final stage of culture shock is acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean that new cultural environment are completely understood. Rather, it signifies that complete understanding isn't necessary to function and thrive in the new surroundings. During the acceptance stage, travelers or the guest or the people who have moved from one country to another, the expats, are able to draw together the resources they need to feel at ease. When we talk about the cultural shock, we talk about 4 stages of cultural shock and how to overcome it. One thing we have constantly observed that right from the first stage of the exploration to the last stage of acceptance, the inclusion is something which is important. Inclusion in one's thought, how to include the new culture, how to get adjusted or how to be flexible with the new culture, as well as the host country, how to how to reciprocate or how to give the comfort zone to a person who has come to the country to get into the adjustment mode and gradually the recovery mode. So that is the inclusion. Something what doesn't allow us to move forward is labeling here. So this is another thing, whether it is a guest or a host, labeling is something which comes out as the biggest hindrance when we really want to get into a cultural collaboration. So this is another thing one must have to work upon. So what I personally feel, the acceptance or the cultural diversity when we talk about, the emotions and the mental, the EQ has to be very strong, the emotional quotient has to be very strong, and so is your mental ability to accept, understand, adapt, and be flexible. Now together, let's ace it up, because I'm sure it is not something which is very difficult. There is no one right way to teach or to learn. Keeping this in mind, why not expand your study or teaching beyond country's boundaries? Teaching is a collaborative art. We must always be ready to learn from one another. Let's not limit learning to our own national borders. And this is exactly when we teach to our students about the 21st century skills, when we teach about the competencies, when we teach about the ethics and values, this is what we emphasize upon. So whether it is problem solving, it is the innovative way of thinking, it is critical thinking, it is being informed what is happening around, everything sums up when we become more culturally diversified in our thoughts and in action. That's all from my end, but to the majority here, I might be sounding repetitive because we represent a global and open-minded community. But we are just a small fraction of the world. Let's work towards increasing the tribe of like-minded people as a snowball effect. And this is how the real meaning and the real sense of cultural diversity. And this is how we can create the culturally diversified global village, as we call it. So thank you so very much. And thank you for having me over. The organizers over here, I would like to specially mention my dear friend, Rachel, as well as Janvi being constant, the support to me. So thank you so very much. I'm open to the question if anyone is having, though I know it is too repetitive for you, but again, sometimes reinforcement is important. So perhaps I could tickle that small nerve, which we know that when we have to go out, we have to practice the same.
Incredible. Thank you, Doctor. Amazing, Doctor. Kavita, thank you very much for sharing with us this great knowledge. Fantastic. Does anyone have a question? I got a moment to give her one. Come in. You got it? Okay, great. Thanks, guys, for joining. Good one, right? No one touched that topic yet, so really inspiring. We're dealing with that.
May I? May I?
Yeah,
Go for it.
please.
Thank you very much. So we are having a panel discussion like in a couple hours, I think, about the same topic. So I just want to know, and I want this to inspire me as well, what is your best tip for an educator in order to enforce inclusion and diversity in an organization or in a school or in a university?
Great. Thank you so much for your question, and such an interesting question, because this is something as an educator I have always experienced. And when I co-founded my school, we ensured that we do it. So first thing, the festivals, the art, these things connect music. These things connect teachers, students at the common platform. So in our school, and even that goes the same with the workshops wherever I conduct, or the consultancy, or advisory where I extend to, that create your school calendar in such a way which must have the amalgamation of cross culture. Not necessary that all the culture in 1 year calendar you can bring upon, but what you can do is you can decide. You know how UN comes up with a theme. The schools can come up with a theme. They can design a theme for the year and let the whole year, the celebrations, the events should go on that. So, you can pick up maybe a continent, maybe a country, and then we can go ahead with that. And generally the best way to deal with it, because to be in sync with the theme which is UNESCO or UNICEF or UN is coming up with, because they generally come up with a global theme which has a lot of meaning, and we can connect with a lot of global things. So that is one thing. Second, I always feel that whenever any curriculum which is being extended or delivered in the class, that should always have a global connect. You can just not talk about what you are, what is your country all about, or what is a group of the students you are catering to. Rather, you have to give them a broader vision, you have to give them a global vision. So everything should converge, or rather I might say the diverge, when it comes to the globalization. So the events, the delivery of the curriculum, the content, everything, some or the other way should be connected globally. That's very important.
Great. Thank you for that, Dr. Kavita. Thank you. Give her a round of applause. Incredible. She's going to catch a flight. Exciting times. You came here just for this event, so we are grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your... And are you on LinkedIn? You're on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah,
LinkedIn?
I'm very much on LinkedIn.
Would you like some
yes.
connections?
I would love to have you all as my connect. I could see, and I met a couple of you whom I've been connected for years, and here I'm meeting. So my LinkedIn connects I'm meeting you for the first time in person too. So that is one thing, great thing, and I'm looking forward to meet you all soon virtually on that platform, and later, you never know, again in the same platform here.
Connect with Dr. Kavita. Amazing, amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Congratulations for being an award winner. It's incredible to have you here. Thank you. Have a wonderful trip home, okay? Give her a round of applause. It's great to have these visionaries here. Great topic.